Hello, everyone. Kenyon here. Basketball Rewind. Another week down. A lot of things happen. A lot of things to
What are
discuss.
we?
There's a lot of NBA wide things that we're gonna kind of zoom around a little bit with. Then we'll get back to everyone's favorite team, which is the Toronto Raptors, at least here, I guess. And then we'll just see where things go. Of course, a certain someone got a jersey retirement. We'll touch on that later on. But to start off with, I just want to kind of do not a full standings watch, but just talk about two teams that I've seen that kind of might be concerning me a little bit. They might be under the fire, and they might have challenges with what to do next. And that would be the Denver Nuggets, who the Raptors played. Of course, we did go 1-3, and I believe Coach won that battle. And, we'll definitely do a standings, projection for the next week after. But yeah, them as well as the Milwaukee Bucks. So, who do you guys want to talk about first? I am going to assume that both Coach Roach as well as Beyond the Locker Room, who are joining me today, are basically doing well. So, first and foremost, I should ask, are you guys doing well? But then after that, we'll go right into it. And who should we talk about first? I think we should probably talk about the Denver Nuggets first because we face them. And I'll let Beyond go first.
Sure. Denver is one of those teams that, in a way, you could see this happening. I think you could see the collapse started to happen. Obviously, in games, 5 and 7, I think it was, but they lost. That was obviously 7, but I think it was 5 they lost. Where you could see the beginnings of like the crumbling of this team. I think one of the things that always kind of thrown people off, which I never understood, was treating Denver as if they're this dynastic team. I never understood that. They'd won one championship, and yet they were getting this type of like benefit of the doubt or this type of like reverence as if they won 3 championships. So they're the Golden State Warriors. I'm like, guys, man, they won one championship. And I'm not trying to, I'm always of the opinion if you win, you win. But when it came to like, the strength of who you played, fair enough. I get it. It wasn't the strongest, but they did what they had to do. But to act as if they were like the 96 Bulls that we were talking about here was like, guys, like, okay, like slow it down a little bit. They got a lot of weaknesses. And considering that 2 or 3, guys you invest so much money in are perennially hurt all the time, at young ages, it makes it a little scary if you're a Denver fan. And we saw it there the other night. And I'll leave Coach for the other parts of it. I think there's some other elements to it, but I'll just go with a starting lineup. I mean, we saw it over the summer with Team Canada. Murray's a shell of himself. I mean, he has almost no burst to get by anybody. So that pick and roll isn't half near as effective as it used to be because now I think people are starting to, kind of play him for like, we'll just play back and see what you do. Or play up on you actually and see if you can beat us because he just has had no lift in his shot or anything. We saw that in Team Canada during the summer, and it seems to continue. Porter came out of a bit of a slump. He's shooting a bit better, but he too. I mean, he's always seems like he's just one moment away from being out for like a month. And then you look at the rest of the roster and make Coach. I'll leave that maybe for that. I'll leave that on the plate for you perhaps, but. Yeah, man, like Jokic is never no defensive stalwart to begin with, so we don't have other elements around to kind of help support him. We were kind of going back like 5-6 years ago with Jokic. He's going to get exposed. So there is some trouble. I never really, maybe it's the Mavericks fan in me, but I never had any fear when the prognosticator came out about Denver. I was like, you know what, I'm good. Don't worry about Denver. So I mean, do I think they'll get better as the season goes on? Yes, I think they will. Do I think they're going to be some big-time threat? No. But do I think if they get the right matchup in a first round of playoff series, I would be nervous? Yes. That depends who that matchup is.
Coach, your thoughts?
Similar to what Beyond had just said, Jokic is playing out of his mind right now. He's averaging 30, 12, 10, steal and a half, a block. I don't expect the block or the steal and a half. Probably it might go down as the year goes along because, as Beyond said, he's not Bill Walton on defense. But Jamal Murray as Beyond had just pointed out, has been injury prone for a few years now. He had his best year probably when they won the championship, how essential he was to that title run. Michael Porter Jr. was once the top high school prospect in the country until he had a back injury. And he's never really fully recovered from that. I know he's had a back surgery or two. And when you're under the age of 25 having those things, usually they don't pan out too well. So, I know there's two of your top three players right there just with multiple injuries. Aaron Gordon just got a big contract, and by paying all these guys, you lost to KCP, you lost to Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown he's a big part of that championship run. So it's kind of like what the Lakers went through a few years ago when they lost all their players from their championship run. They lost to Alex Caruso, and ironically enough, they lost KCP and Dwight Howard. Rondo. The list goes on when you decide to start paying more of your core players. Some of these other players who are part of that championship run, that role player run, well, they're going to get paid too because of the championship. Kind of like what Bruce Brown got $23 million. I'm glad he got his money, but when he goes to free agency next time, he's not getting that. There's no way. And same with some of these guys who are role players. So look, I think Denver, they're looking a bit older. I know they're in the bottom 10 in pace. It's hard to compete in the NBA, be a contending championship if you're in the bottom 10 in pace. Offensively and defensively, their ratings, they're okay so far, but they're not championship caliber. And that's concerning because they're all in. All the money that they've spent over the last couple of years on Jokic, recently on Jamal Murray, recently on Aaron Gordon. There's no turning back. You got to go forward with it.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. I don't have too much more to add. I mean, they are an aging team. I tend to approach some of these conversations from a financial side of things, and I'm the cold accountant in a sense that way. Denver, because of the new CBA, is running into challenges whereby they can't make moves easily. So when we talk about, I always go back to Bruce Brown as an example. It's like Bruce Brown would be perfect for them. Heck, KCP would be. But tough decisions were made, and those decisions were made because it's going to be hard for them to make moves in the future. Regardless of what moves they made, they're now where they are, and now again, it's hard to make moves for the future. They don't have a lot of control over their future in terms of pick equity, et cetera, et cetera. They have Jokic right in the middle of his prime, closer to the end of his prime than the beginning, but this is it. And so if you're serious about competing, and this will lead into the next team, the Bucks, of course, you have to make that tough decision. And I don't know if it's an easy thing to just rip that thing apart because you don't have the control over your future draft equity. And so they have to find ways to if I'm going to talk about problem solving in a positive way, they need someone who can help offensively Jokic. And I don't know if a Bruce Brown can do that. It'll help. It'll help the back end, aside from like the money aspect. But they need someone. That's why I look at Jimmy Butler's not the best person for them to trade for, just because, again, I don't know how they cobbled together enough to get Jimmy Butler on that team. But they need someone real who can help punch up with Jokic on a regular basis to put them in a position to get to the playoffs. Because I don't think they can get to the playoffs and not have home court and have the best chance of winning.
But Kenya, I think they were thinking the same as you, and they thought Westbrook was that answer.
They did. We've had some conversations about that, and I know people like to be really hard on Westbrook, and I can understand the conversation that maybe he's not the best fit, and that might be the case. But you're right, they did try, but sometimes you make bad gambles, and when you're in their position, every single move and every single pick and everything needs to be really, really properly assessed, because the margins get razor thin. And right. I'm not just talking about like the moves, but even that spills over to the on-court product, where again, why do you want depth? It's so that in the playoffs you can put more chess pieces on the board defensively or offensively. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if you're ready to move to Milwaukee because of my point.
Oh yeah, we can move to Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, I think my point stands for both teams. I think it's an overall thing. I think it's something to really watch, folks, as you see in the next few years, especially with the new CBA. Watch and see pretty much, I would say, from about the 14th or the 15th pick onwards, juniors and seniors are going to be prime people in this case in drafts. Okay, because if you're a Denver, you saw this year LA would connect. Like when you don't have time, you need someone that can produce right now. And I think you're going to see the connects to the world. I mean, I mentioned in this case here, Brown has been pretty much, he was a junior, so I think when he came out as well for Kansas, has been able to actually deliver further. They're going to need more guys like that. Of course, Hawkeyes, in this case in Miami, they figured that out a little earlier than maybe some other team.
Yeah.
Seniors and juniors as quick as possible because you don't have time to kind of start developing folks and waiting 3 years when you're a team that you think could win a championship and you need depth in a hurry.
Good points. Yeah, I mean, just before we go to coach, I'll just say Giannis is ready to win now. Obviously, his brothers do take up spots. I'm not even talking about the money standpoint. It's just like you have a limited amount of roster spots, and his brothers have at times taken up some of those roster spots. And that also is a decision that is made to respect the player, but sometimes you got to make the tough decision for the good of everyone, really. And I think if Giannis won, I'm not saying that that's the difference between Giannis winning or losing, but I'm sure if he had a better playoff run, he'd be less angsty about, you know what I mean? So
Don't worry about Bronny. Give me a break.
Yeah, well, that too. But yeah, I'm not even going.
Yeah, I mean, we're just calling a spade a spade. Bronny's a better player than either of those two guys, even right now. Right?
Yeah. It just gets to the point where, like, I'm not judging it, but I'm just saying, like, those type of things do. Giannis needs to also recognize that he has played a role into leading his team to where it is right now. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, he got rid of his own coach. Right?
Him and
I have
Dame,
never seen in my life, maybe in my lifetime, or at least in quite a while, a superstar put so much pressure on an organization, maybe more than Giannis. He's been doing this for years, saying, I want to win, I want to win, I want to. People say about LeBron. I'm not saying there's so much anything wrong with that, with these guys that want to win. Giannis has been very out there about how much he wants to win. So much so, even though he's won a championship in Milwaukee, the next year, he's literally saying, well, if we're not winning, I don't think I want to be here.
I mean, this is why
he's really forward with that.
Exactly, coach. And this is the reason why I challenge folks when they want to come with LeBron stuff. I say, like if you think about this. If LeBron done half the stuff that you described that Giannis did, they would have him pillaring and burning his jersey and effigy in this case here if he did the stuff. Can you imagine LeBron having Darvin Ham and you're 31-13 before the All-Star break and think, you know what? I just can't feel you anymore. Sorry, Darvin. It's been fun.
To be fair, he did have one moment in Cleveland where that kind of happened. And that was during the second stint with the Kyrie trade. Now, to be fair, was it the Kyrie or was it after? I think it was after Kyrie. Where they traded for Jay Crowder and all that kind of
exactly. He was pissed off. Now that's fine, but when it's all said and done, he didn't get the coach fired.
No.
They
even let Blatt play out the whole year and everything like that. And to be fair, like, he had a point. I mean, so yeah.
And the only other thing I would say about that is that I mean, Giannis wanted Griffith. That was his guy.
Yeah.
He's his guy.
And what's his name? Dan Hurley?
Yeah. But my point is LeBron.
I see what you're saying. Giannis wanted Adrian Griffin.
To probably this year.
Here's my thoughts on that. I have a theory that Dame played a huge role in that because who did he have a fight with early on? Terry Stotts.
Right. But the point is, if you're the dude, all due respect to Dame, fall back.
Yeah.
Right? Dame couldn't feel that, and there's no respect. I know Coach is your guy in this case here, but Dame couldn't be feeling that way in this case here. He could put his chest out and say, you know what, he got to go. Unless he had 34 and had his back on that.
I just
It's Giannis's team.
Yeah.
Right?
They moved a little quick on Adrian. I'll just be
a
honest.
little?
Yeah.
Because the record right now is worse.
Yeah, it is.
Considerably.
Yeah.
Sorry, Doc.
And they hired a guy who has a terrible track record for being in the playoffs. No offense to Doc. I love Doc, but
you're right. But and also it's a bit greasy when the guy was quote a consultant at the time.
Yeah.
That's
Look, hey man.
And literally on the radio like the week before talking about the team.
That's pretty that's pretty much
that's a little slimy.
That's pretty much what you've been hanging out here with with the manager in this case here. And all of a sudden when you get the divorce 3 weeks later in this case here, the manager you're hanging out with is now your spouse. It's like, oh yeah, nothing's happened there. Don't worry about it, honey. It was all good. We were just working late to finish up the project. You know, come on.
Yeah, but that, with Milwaukee though, they're in a worse, I think, situation that maybe than Denver because they're much older. Brook Lopez, this is it for him. First, Middleton's been playing on one knee now for about 5 years. Dame is 34, I believe. Not getting younger. He don't play any defense anyway. He's my guy. Dame's my favorite, but he don't play any defense. He's just like me. He's just a better shooter than I am.
Yeah.
But
Well, there's another factor in here, Coach, which is they're not only in a worse place because of that, but Milwaukee's in a worse place because, and I found this out recently, both them as well as the Celtics, they don't own the infrastructure that they play in, which, you know, there's another discussion in there related to Toronto and the WNBA, which we'll get into in a whole nother day. But like, this is a challenge because when your product isn't great, or if you're not making the playoffs, you really get tight margins because you're not making money every time you play in the same way. If you think about it, every time they play, you're not making money.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned those two teams because who's been up for sale for the last 2 to 3 years, right? My man put all the chips in. Said it's been fun for the Bucks owner, her part owner. Is he the one with the daughter?
No. You're thinking the Kings owner. The Bucks is now a minority owner.
Right, but remember the Bucks had two partners in this case.
Yes.
One that had the daughter, there's Lazary or every case in this
Yes.
case. And the other one. I can't remember which one's the one sold though.
I can't remember which one, but I know a minority group.
Right, and then
ownership.
now the Celtics are on sale, which will be interesting to see how much they get sold for because I mean, yeah.
Yeah. To the Celtics point, and I don't know. I assume it's kind of almost like a like how I have a friend that used to work in event management or whatever, where he'd have an artist and he'd pay, they'd pay up front and then they get it back in the ticket sales or whatever. But there's certain things like the concessions that they're not making money on. And then, when it's off, you're not making any money on that team.
Exactly, right? You can't get Taylor Swift coming through your arena.
Yeah, this is true.
That money, right? All the Swifties, like you're not getting that money when it comes through the arena.
Sorry, Ed Rogers. Yeah.
I'm not getting from.
I'm just teasing.
But to your point, the Pfizer arena has been used multiple times in this case during this political campaign. They're not getting
that is true.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. You can't even get the Raptors. I didn't think about that, but yeah. So it's tough. So it really, and even to be honest, in terms of other things where I don't know how it works, but I'm fairly certain it's not just for free. Where you basically work out a deal with the city where during certain hours, that arena could be used for voting booths and stuff like that. You get money for that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're missing out on a lot of revenue by not owning the infrastructure, and there's not a lot of teams now that really aren't in that position. So I think the Bucks are in a very precarious situation, especially when you're paying that repeater tax.
I will say this, Kenyon. I won't say all of it because I don't want anyone to take the idea that that we discussed. But I'll just say, remember we talked about a particular generation. I'll just leave it at that.
Yep.
All three of those players in this case and those teams right now are in some very sticky situations.
Right, because the other one they've talked about moving. I don't think it'll happen, but we'll talk later. And tune in next week. We talk about
soon, man, if you want to do your little documentary.
Well, sometimes there is a lost generation. We'll leave it at that. Just to tease things out for people. with that being said, it is actually topical to talk about Joel Embiid and the city of brotherly love, which was not so brotherly and lovely recently. So there was, we'll just say, a scuffle, an altercation, however you want to define it, between.
They call it a shove, so let's call it what it is, a shove.
I like the scuffle, but
Well, scuffle makes it sound like in this case both guys were going at it. I doubt.
Oh, okay, that's fair. That's fair. I didn't want to. It's not a punch. We know it's not a punch. I thought like
the planet are going at it with Joel.
Like to me, a scuffle is always like there's a hold me back moment, as Jalen Rose would say, and then but fair enough. Okay, all right. So there was a shove. There was a physical altercation between Embiid and a reporter, and Embiid shoved a reporter. Now, there are several ways to discuss this. Obviously, there's a professional element that if you're in a professional workplace, even if you're, I guess there's a reporters union or whatever, I don't know how that works, but like these people are not necessarily like team PR people, but you should not be touching a reporter. Fine, there's that element. There's also another element to this, which is the player side of things, and this is where we can also like relate it back to a Raptors side of things, where it's like it's okay to be harsh about someone's on-court play and stuff like that, but sometimes when people get into personal areas about players, you got to be really careful about what you're saying and putting out there online, regardless of whether you're, tagging a player or not. But it's true, and I think that. From what I've heard, and I'm still kind of looking into the story myself, this reporter kind of went out of pocket.
I showed you guys the excerpt. That's disgusting. I'll just be.
I didn't read the story. So you have? I presume.
I still have it right here. I'll read it right here.
Yeah, feel free.
So if just in case we're not kind of taking it from any
post. I'm not trying to lessen anything.
No, I hear what you're saying, but I just want folks that haven't heard this story just to get a sense of what we're talking about. So let's see here. Let's see. Oh yeah, hang on. Sorry guys, not good for dead space here, but Embiid is here. Like,
well, while you looked it up, I'll just say I've seen people talk about or talk to directly to players' families and stuff like that, or say like this player was nasty to a fan when they weren't or whatever, and sometimes stories grow. It's almost like a game of telephone. You get these made up stories sometimes. Again, you just have to be very careful of what you're reporting on. I think, there are certain things that are fair to kind of judge players on, other things that aren't. I also say part of the topic was about Embiid's inability to stay on the court this year. Now, obviously some of it is the player, may or may not be injury prone or not, but there's other aspects to it where, and we've had this discussion offline, a whole bunch of times. Actually, I had one just this week where I personally think that it's not all on the players, and that too much of it gets put on the players when they are not necessarily always picking and choosing. We're not playing back-to-backs. I think there might be only one player that I can think of that kind of has that, that kind of pulls that, and that he don't play in any of the cities that we're talking about. Or I'm talking about Kawhi. That's a whole other separate set of issues, and that's between him and his medical team. But again, it's usually the medical personnel that is part of the teams that are making those decisions.
So here is this is from Sam Vecini posted. I won't say what Sam Vecini said to skew or anything. I'll just read what the reporter had written, excerpt that got Embiid seeing red.
Yeah.
Well, Embiid, this is quote, Joel Embiid consistently points to the birth of his son, Arthur, as the major inflection point in his basketball career. He often says that he wants to be great to leave a legacy for the boy named after his little brother, who tragically died in an automobile accident when Embiid was in his first year as a 76er. Well, in order to be great at your job, you first have to show up for work. Embiid has been great at just the opposite. Now in his 11th season, he consistently has been in poor condition. This poor conditioning apparently seems to have delayed his debut this season. Embiid won't play in Wednesday's opener or the next two games. Now that's
now, you can talk about him not showing up or whatever. Or you can leave the family out of it.
And just so we in this case, since this reporter seems like he wants to be famous, let's just actually put his name out here as well.
Sure,
too.
go for it. I don't mind.
So because everybody wants to say, the freedom of the press, which I get in this case here, but sometimes the press has responsibilities too. You don't get carte blanche to say whatever the hell you want to say about people.
Yeah. And and just so
If
people
you talk the
know,
talk, you better walk the walk.
well,
Yeah.
and also I think in terms of that, like we're pretty pro. I wouldn't say we're both pro player, but we're also pro media. Like we're not a channel that kind of comes out against media, anti-media, like how some people do. I don't really like that, but I
No.
do think that you have to have there's a ethics that is involved with
Standards.
reporting. Essentially,
Yeah.
you can't be talking about people's dead brothers and stuff like that. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Not
Marcus is the journalist in this case here. From the
Sorry,
Philadelphia.
what's his name?
Marcus Hayes from the
Marcus Hayes,
Philadelphia.
Okay. Yeah, look, this article crossed a boundary to me. This crossed a personal boundary. You don't get involved with coaches or players' personal lives. You don't get into, especially a younger sibling who has passed. Like, I couldn't imagine what our media would have done if they said something stupid like that last year. What had happened to RJ? Like, you don't do that. That's just, you're crossing so many boundaries. I don't blame Joel Embiid for getting upset.
Too, right? As if this is some guilt trip about his kid's birthday. In other words, he's trying to say that in this case, he's not playing in this case and he's disappointing his kid. Who the hell are you to say that?
Yeah. That there's so many boundaries have been crossed there.
Yeah, and I think the mindset there we're talking about, and as I said before, I'm not suggesting anyone should put their hands on anybody in this case here in a workplace.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I'm saying. So,
no, but there's a little bit of empathy where you can understand why it happened.
Like someone
Yes.
kind of went off, and MB will probably get fined. He probably might get, ironically, he might miss another game or two.
Yeah, I'll also just say, I won't say the other person's name, but there were other reporters that reported on it and made it sound like he punched the dude, and those reporters weren't necessarily in the room when it happened. So again, I don't like getting into this, well, you weren't in the room, so you can't report it, because there's, but like, you just, especially with these incidents, you have to be very clear cut and careful with
because you end up losing trust on both ends,
Yeah.
right? So like the players don't trust the media, which is already pretty thin to begin with. And in this case, the media feel like, oh, they're going to gang up on us and don't have our backs in this case, as far as being respected as an institution. It works both ways. But like, I mean, this is like the second year now since post-COVID, they were in the locker room again.
Well, Paul George also made certain comments about this type of stuff where, like why are reporters kind of around us? He didn't mention who it was, but in certain cities that are looking at us when we're just out of the shower and talking to our families and stuff like that. So there's a whole lot. There.
And I think in some ways, to go to Paul George's point, and funny enough, this policy kicked in about 4 weeks ago in the NFL, where they made a change in this case of like exactly like there's gonna be like a cooling off period where you're not coming into the locker room when the guys are finished a game. And I think there is some psychological element of that is actually very healthy overall, because what, to your point, or even Paul George's point was implying, it gets to a very dehumanizing mindset.
Yeah, there's a lot of
yeah.
You know where what I'm thinking. There's a historical element that is part of this where this person is a spectacle and I can treat them like a circus act, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or look up Donald Sterling, fellas. Just look up that. You can find out his one of the great treats he gave us in this case here with that whole scandal. But yeah, to me, it just crossed the line. I think overall, Embiid will get dealt with by the NBA, but I think the NBA doesn't consider the policy moving forward. Maybe they might have to go find a middle ground where there is something similar to the NFL, where there's a cooling off period, if you will. Because I know media people were complaining during COVID, and then when COVID started waning, they're like, how come we still can't get in the locker room? Now, I'm not a journalist. I don't know in this case here, though the rationale from the journalist side is that you get the guys heat of the moment or the ladies heat of the moment to get kind of the best type of quote you can get. Fine. That's their point. But at the same time, there has to be a little bit of a respect in this case from the humanity standpoint of the athlete, right? So, like, I think they're going to have to find a way to balance this. Does it have to be a press conference as they were doing before? That, where it's like, oh, no, I want that, because then they start constructing their ideas and I don't get the rawest emotion. Right? Because there is a little bit of gotcha as well, too, is what they want. Let's call it what it is, right? If a guy comes in and he's hot with another player from the opposing team, and he says, guy's a bleep, bleep, bleep. He's like, ooh, okay, what is that? Well, tell me more. The guy's hot.
Well, there's even a difference between, like, having, like, an open gym, because there's those guys work very closely with the players and have an established relationship, so they know, like, there's a trust there. Whereas like a person who's just like an independent media, now independent media is important, but an independent media person who's, just trying to like make it in the business, and you oftentimes, sadly, because journalism is up against the wall these days, there is a kind of a push to be the first or whatever, and you see that actually in the. You know where you see it actually? We won't go down this whole rabbit hole, but you see it in the gaming industry where people are given access to games and stuff like that. Like 2K early, and then you're not supposed to break certain dates as to when you talk about the story. But if you're first, you get the most clicks, you get the whatever, and sometimes that's worth getting fired over just so you can try to make your career. And it's
yeah. I mean, when it's all said and done, I call it myself an arrangement for the engagement.
It's a good line, but
good one.
But it's sad too. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on it. I think, Coach, I don't know if you had enough.
I just feel like keep family and kids out of this, regardless of circumstance. Keep them out. Talk about the game. Like Beyond said, if one player says something about another player, obviously you're gonna report that. But I just wish they'd keep family and kids out of it.
100%. Well, I will add one caveat. If a family member has said something directly about like someone's playing time or whatever, I think that's different. But in there are lines that like where it's okay, fine. But listen, you're here on Basketball Rewind. We could use nuance. We could figure that out. I'll leave it at that. Next. I expect that our audience is there with us. Okay, moving along. I think we need to talk about Toronto now. Obviously, we went 1-3. So I don't know if you guys want to go game by game or just kind of look at big picture, but I feel like looking kind of big picture and what the takeaways are, and that also kind of will combine with the next topic, which is we did see a dynamic duo kind of form on the Raptors and cause a little bit of chatter on the timeline. So obviously that's Gradey and RJ. In 1-4, I think that there has been some overreaction. So I want to talk about the overreactions first before we talk about the individual players. And what I will say is this. At the beginning of this week or midway through the week, we saw Kirk Goldsberry put out a graph. If I find it, I will try to put it on the screen somewhere or at least link the tweet. And essentially, it showed where we are. It's still early, low sample size, even asterisked that. But we were the worst defense in the NBA. Now, I want to point out something, and I was talking to, I'll get credit where credit's due. I was talking to JD a little bit about this, and he pointed out something, and we were talking, going back and forth, just about philosophies of defense. And you'd think we're actually fielding a better defensive team overall. Forget about the offensive side of things, but the defensively, we're fielding a better team. If you include that one of the games, actually a couple of the games except for one right before this thing came out, included Scotty, actually. In fact, yes. So the challenge here is we are fielding a better defensive team. If you look at the end of the season, we were putting out guys like Jordan Nwora, who would jump with his legs being like this close at a 45-degree angle to where he's trying to, who he's trying to defend. That's not good point of attack defense. So you have upgraded the defense, especially point of attack, especially since a lot of times they were hiding IQ, and IQ was sitting to end the season. So if you just look at the end of the season and say, oh, we were bad, we were 26th or whatever, we're now worse on defense. And that is kind of interesting. Coach, I'll start with you. Your thoughts.
We have the worst defensive rating in the NBA, so we are the worst defensive team right now.
Yeah.
So this management tried to bring in guys who can play defense. Davion Mitchell, Jamal Shed, National Defensive Player of the Year, Jonathan Mobo, who's looking like, to me, as we speak, the best defensive player on this team. Especially, I'll say him and Pirtle to a degree. Pirtle is more so just positioning.
Not my man Gradey. Come on, man.
Hey, he gets it. He gets some flashes.
He had moments.
But this gets back to a team philosophy. I know our guy Mount for the North has said defense doesn't seem to be a priority. right now. I know they've talked about it, but the Blue Jays back last summer said, "Boy, we're in the best shape of our lives." Look what that happened, last in the AL East. So if you're talking about defense, that's great, but what are you doing about it in terms of adjustments? What are you doing in terms of rotating? What are we doing in terms of matchups? Are we giving guys the right matchups? Do we really think Ochai Abashi should be starting against LeBron James in the front court of him and Anthony Davis and Ruby Hachimura? Like, that's what I'm talking about in terms of we're not doing these matchups. We're not giving our players a chance to win when that is our matchup out there. So we really have to understand scouting reports, knowing what guys do and what they don't do well. There are just times that we get stuck on screens a lot. Like the Lakers game, I think it was Boucher or Mitchell, I can't remember. They got stuck on the same flare screen and Rui hit 2 corner threes basically to ice the game. Like, it's just little things like that. But we've also started out the first quarter absolutely terrible. I think it's the worst in the league. Now, the good news about the Sacramento game, we actually started out the quarter pretty good. So that was a nice change. So, well, it's going to be a mixture of coaching, but also going to have the right personnel. And I just look at the personnel of this team. You don't have enough people who can play defense. Let's just call it for what it is.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. Beyond, I'll let you go first, though. But there's a lot to unpack.
No, I mean, this is the reason why, this is the reason why when we had our prognostication, I guess a week or 2 weeks ago, I said 27 wins because, no matter how much, cheerleading and pom-pomming, the fan base wants or other folks are within the Toronto media might think, I don't know. Maybe I'm old school. There's certain things you just need to have in this case here to be a competent team. If you don't have front court depth, it's hard to be a competent defense. If you have no shot blocking or rim protection, it's hard to be a competent defense. If you have no wing defenders, really, it's hard to be a competent defense. So somehow everyone's supposed to tell me this team's supposed to be a really good team. It's going to be a 500 team, and yet still can't play defense. And I'm looking at the roster. I'm looking at this. And I'm not even trying to outline anyone else. I'm just looking at the roster itself. I'm like, how am I finding 41 wins on this team? That's not even including when you start getting the injuries, which that's a whole other thing. We have quite a few injury-prone players on this team that play key positions. So that's something you got to factor in. And I'm sitting around going like, okay, how are you trying to be, how are you trying to be a top-notch defending team? And think about this. And I don't know. Like, I'm not sure if it's done on purpose or not. But we literally have a roster in this case with no backup centers, no one over 6'10" after Pirtle. The other night there against Sacramento, it was pretty much the bonus against the Smurfs. All right?
Yep.
We have not one after you get past Scotty Barnes, and we're playing him as a power forward in this lineup, by the way, folks. You have no small forwards on this team right now. None. Think about that.
Mobo's like the closest, and he's not quite he's an in-between player. We don't know really what he is either.
No. And Mobo's been playing for the most part, with the exception the other night against LeBron. He's been playing pretty much playing against point guards and two guards.
Yeah.
He's not defending small forwards that much.
No, so he can't defend AD. What is he going to do against AD? Like, we got to keep it a buck. Like,
he had trouble with LeBron, right? Like, so that's
yeah.
Right. So all I'm saying is that, and don't get me wrong, no knock on the kid. He's had trouble with LeBron. Joined the club. So I'm not
but you get small really quickly.
Exactly. That's the point I'm saying. So when you look at the team and how it's built, there's no small forwards, and there's essentially really one power forward of size.
You also have very small guards for the most part, and even RJ, who's like, his best position is like offensively as a 2, but like because he's small as a 3, and then it's like all these things start spiraling. Like Gradey's best position is really a 2 as well, and so you have these challenges. I'm not advocating any sort of trade or anything like that. I'm just saying like we have size challenges, and Bruce Brown getting healthy doesn't help that. Kelly Olynyk doesn't help that, right?
Like, that doesn't help definitely at all on defensive end.
Exactly, but that's the thing I keep telling folks is like, well, when we get healthy, it's like, well, what's that going to be? That's the brigade coming.
That's the thing. Like people keep brigade, but like people keep talking about like how you put out Bruno Fernando, to pasture or whatever, so to speak. Sure. And then it's like, oh, well, we'll play Kelly. Okay, well, Kelly can't defend, and we already know that Kelly's not really a center. He's a stopgap as a center, and he has a bad back, so he definitely is not really, starting off the year well. Like we saw this before play out with, not comparing their game entirely, but I'm just saying with Birch and the bad knees and that sort of thing. It's tough. It really is tough, and I'm not like saying there's anything wrong with the Kelly contract. What I'm saying is that our roster is flawed. As simple as that. We are starting with a flawed place. Yeah.
Exactly. You have to, that's why I keep saying the margin for error for this team is so infinitesimal. Is this much? They have to do just everything just right to win a game.
Yeah, it reminds me of the year actually we won 46 or 48 games a couple of years ago with Nurse. The margin of error on that team with all guys 6'9" and under was really, really small. And with this team, of course, it's even smaller.
But to your point, that's a great example, Coach. But even in that sense, Nurse knew the margin of error was that small, and he maximized
Yes, he did.
what he could maximize, right? Right? Like, yeah, I'll trap in this case, and anyone's going to be in a corner. My 6'9", Rottweilers are coming for you, to use a Phil Jackson phrase, and that's what he did. And we're going to get out, and we're going to try to run as much as we can because we can't score in the half court, right? As best we can to try to generate offense. This team is acting as if they have some type of personnel that Kenyon's point that does not exist. What?
I do think with the injuries, once they come back, I think our offense has a chance of improving. I think when you add Scotty's offense and Kelly's offense, and Bruce Brown's a good cutter. He's serviceable. I think offensively we can get a little bit better. Defensively, though, I don't know how much margin you're going to make up with that.
That's the thing. Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
But as far as, if you want to get into, I guess the bright spots.
Well, I'll say one other thing just before we get into the bright spots is people do talk about this Raptors fan base who's ready to make a trade always. And one of the latest things is Pirtle, and it's like, okay, if you trade Pirtle, we were talking about this subtly yesterday. I didn't want to get into it until today. Now that people are here, like, comment, and subscribe. You're on Basketball Rewind, and here we are talking about, okay, so like you do that, who plays center? Now, to me, based on, because if you're trading Pirtle, you're not getting a long-term person back, and based on the teams that have it, let's say you trade Pirtle for D'Angelo Russell. Okay, sure, right?
More guards.
you have another guard back. That doesn't really do much for you anyways, and he's a bigger guard, but that's not a long-term answer. And then what are we? You know what I mean? Like, what is the next step?
Coach's boy's gonna get a lot of minutes, man. Enter Chomchi.
Chomchi ain't ready.
They'll ruin him. They'll leave him in 905 for a year.
I don't see anything else in the pipeline that anybody's over 6'10".
Well, apparently you're gonna, it's either that or Kelly, has to step up for 30 minutes.
You don't trade Pirtle. It is not going to happen. Besides, tied to him, whether people like it or not, whether we like it or not, it's not going to happen. You'd have to get a deal that you just can't refuse for Pirtle, and I don't know if that's going to come.
Coach, there's one other person.
Who is that?
The person that should be running high post offense.
No, because you'll ruin him.
Exactly.
Do not have him guarding Joel Embiid.
He would not be happy doing that.
He would not be a happy camper, and I wouldn't blame him in the least.
I wouldn't blame him.
No.
I'm not proposing that they do that. I'm just trying to point out to people the challenges of just like you just let guys go, even just to make it, because you're trying to develop these guys in some sort of context of a basketball context, and it's like, do you really want Scotty playing center? Probably not.
No.
I mean, we're at least trying to get him to power forward.
Exactly. Can you imagine if they went down that path after 2 years and we've been griping for an actual legitimate center to play with the previous incarnation of this team?
Well, then you should have done that before.
To get back full circle, this is why we got Pirtle in the first place, to go right back to that again. Like, the incompetence of the management would be like on full display, which may not be a bad thing.
That too.
No, I don't see that. I don't see anything happening with Pirtle. Look, you'd have to get a center back who can competently play. You probably have to get a pick back. So that's a guy you're getting back basically who's not as good as Pirtle right now. I don't know who that is. If I just threw it out there, Eves Missy would be someone, and then you have to add another contract, and then you'd have to add a pick. Do you really want to go down that road? I
The
don't
only
know if
way
I
to
want
make
to.
it work is like you're doing, and I think that there's like a trade moratorium anyways, because he just got traded. Is you're trading, you're sure he's missing no pick, and like the injured guy that it's going to be DeJounte Murray. Do we really want to add DeJounte Murray to this group when you are just paid IQ and Scotty says he wants to be the point guard, but is slowly shifting towards power forward? Does that sound like a
Yeah.
good idea?
No, I would be very shocked if this team was to trade Pirtle. Maybe I'm wrong, but I see a couple other guys up higher up the pecking order than him.
Not before the draft. At the draft, I think maybe there's a discussion to be had because it gives you more time to build a team. But right now, I
Yeah,
don't see it. Beyond your
I don't
thoughts.
see it.
No, I don't have anything else to say. I mean, I think we've kind of raked over the coals on this one. I mean, like the roster is what the roster is.
Yeah. I'll also just say like the team does do better against teams that like Sacramento that do not have rim protection. So that's an early thing where you're seeing RJ really be able to get downhill and not get stymied. But when you need to see more of it. I mean, we've already seen some of it. I think did RJ play against Minnesota or not quite? Did he get? I
I'm
don't
pretty
think
the
he
Lakers
did.
though.
He did play against the Lakers. I'm not saying that he can't get his, but I'm just saying it's a lot tougher. And so when people are looking at when Scotty gets back, one of the things that he was struggling with was that rim protection. And so yeah, we will have plenty of time though, because Scotty's not coming back anytime soon to talk about what things might happen when he gets back. But got to go positive. That's a weird transition to talk about Gradey Dick and RJ Barrett, but there we go. They were on a heater this this week. Gradey tossed up 230 balls, if I'm not mistaken, and RJ did what he did best, and he scored the ball, and he was a professional bucket getter.
I don't want to undersell the passing. He really filled out the stat sheet.
He did.
He did.
The passing to me never really impresses me with RJ because I kind of expect it. That's just me, just because I've seen him play with. I see how he plays with the national team, so I'm like, I expect him to be more of a playmaker. But hey, fair enough. He did do a good job of drawing. He's one of the few guys on this specific iteration of this team that he can generate enough of his own offense to then like cause shifts in defense. To your point,
That's all I'm saying. Like. To your point, man, thank goodness there's a guy that could collapse the defense a little bit to give some guys a little more time to get open. I think he hit Battle for a few of them. Obviously, Gradey for an odd one or two. Like, to give those guys cleaner looks. That's all I'm saying. I mean, and thank goodness, man.
yeah.
But I'll start with RJ first since it kind of left off with him.
Mm-hmm.
What I appreciate RJ, I said before, we were talking about this just a couple of weeks ago, man. We were talking about guys, you want to say emptying the clip, right? Empty the clip, guys. And I said, sometimes you just need a dude like that. And RJ, whatever you want to say about RJ, we know his flaws. We know his good and his bad and stuff like that. We'll get to some of that probably later on and definitely throughout the season. But boy, one thing I never have to worry about RJ, man. he's gonna get his shots up, and he has no fear. At no time in the game, no fear. And I appreciate that with him, and I think you saw it on display. And the thing is, the Raptors, obviously, with the exception of the Charlotte game a little bit, they kind of made some fake comeback. But really, the other three games were really revealing games to see how this team reacts to like higher level competition in high leverage moments. And this is what you want for young teams, or youngish type. And so to see, not only that, to see from a young coach what he's going to do. Who's going to get the ball down the stretch? Who's going to be on the floor down the stretch? Those were fascinating things to learn about, the Darko as well as the players. And RJ, in this case here, I appreciate the mindset of like, I am not looking to bail these guys out. I am getting 2 feet in the paint, some way, somehow. And I think you need that to be that type of player. And I'm not saying he's the perfect, top option at the moment we have, but he's all we got right now as far as that goes. My man. What? I don't want to give any sort of editorial type of editorial advice to you in this case, Kenyon, but you might want to put the Gradey Dick pre-draft episode available for everyone to watch to see what we had to say. just to give some background content.
I'll link that definitely in
Yeah.
the
Just to make
description.
sure Johnny come latelys to the show, in this case here to the podcast.
You know what? Before, I think it was Coach and I. It was our first, preamble, and then we as a group we actually talked about it because I think it was Coach and I were talking about Gradey Dick and someone else. I can't remember who else, but we talked, and so I'll link both of those episodes in the description down below. I do have a Gradey breakdown that is coming soon, a special rewind episode breakdown that kind of looks into the story of these things and why I think that he might be one of the NBA's up and coming next best shooters. Honestly, stay tuned for that. That's going to be exciting, and I'm proud of how I've grown as an editor from that perspective. So stay tuned, people. But sorry, I kind of went on a preamble there. Coach, you were going to say something.
RJ was trending up from when he arrived here in New York. I remember, I think it was Zazu actually, he was hosting his space right after the trade. Everybody was really excited about quickly. I said, watch this guy, RJ Barrett. There's something different when you come home and when you are the number one high school prospect and then you kind of get pushed out of New York, things don't go your way, you become particularly motivated to prove everybody wrong. I really think he has. And all the trends from last year are just trending up. Every metric, I think, went up for RJ. His efficiencies were improved so much. And I know in the last 3 straight games, he's averaging 30 for this team. And I think on the year, he's averaging about 29 points. But I think beyond had made the point, the biggest thing is his passing. He's averaging about 8 assists a game. Did people see that coming from RJ Barrett last year or a couple of years ago? I didn't. I saw him as a scorer. I did not see the passing coming. We saw some of this a little bit towards the end of the year, a little bit with Team Canada. I think Kenyon had pointed it out. But although we did not expect RJ to be here, I had a feeling he might become the lead scorer on this team this year just because of the game that he likes to play and the opportunity that he's going to have. But I did not see this stretch of basketball. He's going left, and regardless, you can't stop him from going left. He's very a north-south player. RJ's not like Paul George, he can go east and west and stuff like that. You know where he's going, he's still getting buckets, more or less. He looks very good in the pick and roll. I think points per possession in the pick and roll, I think he's 6th in the league. And I think he's just a little bit behind Jalen Brunson right now, which is incredible. Jalen Brunson, we know, he's one of the elite guards in the NBA. So I'm just so pleased with what RJ's had to go through in the last year, especially with his personal life, just to see that he's home, he's doing this in front of his family, in front of his country, and just his demeanor. I think that's one of the big things about RJ. It's one of the things that I really like about this is a no-nonsense guy. He brings his briefcase, he brings his hard hat. You have an idea of what he's going to bring each night. The thing is, he's bringing more scoring, more rebounding, and more assist numbers, and the 3-point numbers are up too. I don't know much more you can ask from this guy. Is he your ideal traditional number one? No, he's not. But he's taking full advantage of this opportunity that he has right now.
I just want to go back there. I totally agree with what Coach is saying there, but I want to go back to Gradey because I don't want people to underestimate what you're seeing before your eyes, right? Now, when I mentioned this in the video that maybe that we talked about earlier, the preview, I always joke about him being white clay, right? And people kind of chuckle and stuff like that. But the reason why I say so is because the moment I saw Gradey Dick play in college, in this case here, I saw 3-level score. Because people assume in this case the way he looks, he's a spot-up guy. And quite honestly, I think the Raptors management and coaching staff last year kind of treated him that way too. And we would sit here on this same podcast and be driven crazy where I don't have much hair left anyways to pull out. And I'm sitting there going like, yo, dude, why is he sitting in the corner every second? What are we doing? And to see what Gradey did on his body, on his mentality, and then also, I can't remember what the stat was they had yesterday about how much he's shooting in the mid-range with guys on him, which is like something like 60%. It's some ungodly number. the shot making we're seeing from Gradey, I don't even think people realize how elite that shot making is right now. And the fact that he's doing this in year 2 already, I thought you might see this next year. Even from that standpoint, overall, the trajectory doesn't surprise me. The only thing surprised me is how fast it's happening. But, I thought it might be later in the year or next year. But the fact that he's doing this now, and then the intangibles, going back to your point with the briefcase with RJ. Gradey's a bit similar to this, where I mentioned the other way, they're like metronomes. You can't tell their personalities one way or the other throughout the game. They stick and they stay focused. He and man RJ. The other thing I noticed with Gradey too is, and you like to see this when you talk about these tight games. And I don't know, I'm not sure, I don't want to put Kenny in the spot, but I would love to see a chance to see what Gradey looks like with the bench. Because at times this season, he's actually elevated the bench or played even with some lineups that have no business being even with anybody. I think of that Denver game where they're up 9 or 10, and it's Gradey and 4 guys that can't shoot. I'm sitting there going, oh, Lord, here goes the game. We're done. And Gradey reels off 9 straight points. I think at that point, hit 2 threes, and I think he got fouled or something else. I'm like, or 8 points. I'm like, oh my gosh, he found a way to keep us above water with lines that have no business. I've seen it a couple times this season where it's like, are you kidding me? And in that fourth quarter, I tell you right now, when so much attention was on RJ, and actually RJ wasn't even on the floor yet. So it was once again a similar scenario. And you're looking for life. And Gradey came to the floor and said, have no fear. Gradey's here. And Gradey hit some shots, 2 baseline fadeaways from 17 feet, where I was like, good gosh, are you kidding me? I think he ended up with something like 12 or 10 in the quarter. Like, when you see those type of things, I think that in my mind, this game last night was his most impressive game of the season. Because he didn't shoot the ball well that night. And yet, when you needed him most, he comes up with something. I think at the time he had like 8 points going into the fourth quarter. And he ended up with 20. And you needed every bit of them. And so many things he did there where it's like you can see his head working and say, okay, they're guarding me this way. He had a high pick and roll at Pirtle. The first time they did it with Reeves and with, I think, AD, they blitzed him. Almost had a turnover call, I think. I'm not sure. Second time he comes down, Pirtle's coming to set the same thing at the top of the 3-point. This time he says, hey, man, I'm gonna ignore ignore it and blow by Reeves, boom, to the basket. Quick adjustments like that, man. I don't think people appreciate what they're watching. I look forward. I am enthralled when I rate at 7 and 7:30 when these games start because I can't wait to see what he's up to next. And to some extent, same thing with RJ. I can't wait. I love it from the top 2 options, man. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been wonderful to kind of watch them grow as a tandem. Obviously, when Scotty is back, he will be part of that, growth, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, I think there's a lot there. For me, I've been critical of Gradey in the sense that I've been wanting him to recognize when he is on the floor and it's your turn to step up into certain roles. And I think now he's starting to do that and do it more consistently with confidence. Love to see it, want to see more of it. And even when Scotty's back, like don't just like. Part of the habit building is not just passing the ball and making the next pass. I mean, we talked to someone the other day who's very focused on playing basketball the right way and in this perfect thing. And it's like sometimes it's not just about making the next pass regardless of who's there, but the best basketball is recognizing who's there and like then that is the next pass. Because sometimes that's where you get into quote Samson folks kind of like paraphrasing. He was talking about how Grady's primary reads are good, but then you saw where he's getting sometimes in his drives. This is going back to last year, right? At the end of the season, he was kind of being elevated above his payroll kind of a thing. And so he'd start making turnovers more and more because it was those secondary reads. So he was making these passes where it's like, okay, if you're looking, you don't actually have that passing window. It's actually better to pass behind you. It's better to kind of like survey a little bit first or have better court mapping. He's going to get there. He does need the reps to get there. But like this is where you talk about execution, basketball IQ, and the growth of those type of areas that take a little bit more time. Those things will get better with when you have an elevated level of talent, Scotty being one of those talents. But at the same time, Scotty needs to grow a lot in those areas too, especially in terms of his playmaking and reads in the half court. I've said it from time and time again. It's pretty obvious at this point. It's hard to deny it. And it's not trying to like dunk on Scotty. I think this is a good transition into that.